Hello there. Let's talk about the circulatory system in humans. The human circulatory system is made up of the heart, the blood vessels, and the blood. The heart functions as the pump in human circulatory system and pumps blood all over the body to various tissues, including important ones such as the brain and the heart itself. It receives blood back from these tissues, and the pathways through which it receives this blood back and sends it through are called the blood vessels. The medium which travels through these blood vessels is called the blood. So essentially, blood carries substances to various tissues in the body and brings them back. So what does blood take to various tissues in the body? There's a few important things. It carries nutrients, oxygen, hormones, and it also helps in maintaining the pH and the temperature of various tissues in the body. And what does it bring back? It brings back carbon dioxide and waste products from these tissues. So what the blood essentially does is help maintain these tissues in a constant normal state and prevent any derangements. This function of the blood is called homeostasis. So how does the blood receive these substances or remove them? Let's see a few examples of this. When the blood is traveling to the lungs, it gives them carbon dioxide, and the lungs provide it oxygen, which it brings back. Thus, the blood takes oxygen from the lungs and removes carbon dioxide through them. Similarly, when the blood is coming back from the intestines, it takes all the nutrients absorbed in the intestine and takes them back and then delivers it to other tissues. And similarly, when it's going to the kidneys, it gives them the waste products which they then excrete as urine. So that's how the blood functions. Now let's have a look at the heart. The human heart is essentially made up of 4 chambers. There's 2 upper chambers which are called the atria. So there's a right atrium and a left atrium. There's 2 lower chambers which are called the ventricles. So there's a right ventricle and a left ventricle. Within the heart, the blood flows from the atrium to the ventricle. This flow of blood is unidirectional because there are walls present between the atrium and the ventricle which prevent any backflow of blood from the ventricle to the atrium. Outside of the heart, the body sends its deoxygenated blood to the right atrium. This blood is pumped by the right atrium to the right ventricle, and the right ventricle then sends this deoxygenated blood to the lungs. The lungs add oxygen to this blood and return them as oxygenated blood to the left atrium. From the left atrium, the oxygenated blood goes to the left ventricle, and the left ventricle sends this oxygenated blood to all over the body. If you have a look at this, the body sends its deoxygenated blood through multiple veins, which then combine into the 2 large veins called the vena cava. So there's a superior vena cava and an inferior vena cava, which enter the right atrium. The right ventricle sends this deoxygenated blood to the lungs through pulmonary arteries. There's a right pulmonary artery and the left pulmonary artery. The lungs return this blood through 4 pulmonary veins, 2 coming from the left lung and 2 coming from the right lung. And the left ventricle sends the blood outside through aorta, which then divides into multiple branches that supply different parts of the body. If you look at this diagram clearly, you can see that there's a loop of blood going through the lungs. This loop is called the pulmonary circulation, and there's a loop at the bottom going through the body. This loop is called the systemic circulation. Another thing that you will notice within this diagram is that the right side of the heart deals with deoxygenated blood, whereas the left side of the heart deals with oxygenated blood. A last thing to note is that the human heart does not actually look like this. This is just a simple schematic diagram to help you understand how the human heart works. Okay, so now let's have a look at the blood vessels. There's 3 kinds of blood vessels, broadly speaking, within the human body. The arteries will always carry blood away from the heart and to various tissues and organs. Mostly this blood will be oxygenated and will contain nutrients, the exception being the pulmonary arteries which carry deoxygenated blood. The arteries also tend to have much thicker walls, and these walls vibrate as the heart contracts, which is what is felt as a pulse. The other kind are the veins. The veins bring blood back to the heart from various organs. Mostly this will be deoxygenated blood and will contain waste materials, exception being the pulmonary veins which carry oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium. The veins tend to have thinner walls and they also have walls within them which prevents the backflow of blood and allows a unidirectional flow. The third kind of blood vessels become important within the tissues. See, the artery divides into multiple smaller branches and small branches until at the level of the tissues there are very thin walled blood vessels. These are called capillaries. The capillaries is where the exchange of materials and substances takes place. So the arterial blood carrying oxygen and nutrients will get delivered into the tissues, and the tissues will give back waste materials and carbon dioxide, which the capillaries will then carry into the veins. That's how the exchange takes place at the level of capillaries. Okay, now let's have a look at the heartbeat. The human heart beats continuously throughout the human lifespan. The average adult heart beats about 72 times per minute. That means it beats more than 10,000 times per day, more than 35 billion times per year. For this reason, the heart has specialized muscle cells which help this contraction, and they are called cardiac muscle cells. The human heart beats spontaneously. This means that it does not need the nervous system to start its contraction. Just as the nervous system works to deliberately start or stop the movements of your body, it does not do so for the heart cells. The impulse for the contraction of the heart actually starts within specialized cardiac cells which are present within the right atrium. Because the impulse begins in the atrium, it is the atria that contract first and pump blood into the ventricle. The atria then relax, and the ventricles then contract as the impulse travels to them and pump blood outside of the heart to various regions of the body, either the lungs or the other regions of the body. And this cycle of the contraction of atria, their relaxation, and the contraction of ventricles and their relaxation is called a cardiac cycle. This happens 72 times per minute on an average. Now, although the nervous system does not start or stop the heartbeat, it can regulate it. Essentially, this means that when your body needs more blood, more oxygen, more nutrients, the nervous system will speed up the body, for example, during exercise or exertion or stress. And when you go back to your normal resting position, the nervous system will slow down the heart rate. The speeding up is done by the sympathetic nervous system, and the slowing down of the heart is done by the parasympathetic nervous system. Okay, so let's talk about blood. Blood, as we said, is the medium of transport for the circulatory system. Essentially speaking, blood is a fluid connective tissue. It is made up of plasma and blood cells. Plasma is mostly water with some electrolytes dissolved within it and some proteins within it. The blood cells are mostly red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So RBCs, WBCs, and platelets, these are the most common blood cells. If you took the human blood and centrifuged it into different components, you will notice that more than half of the blood, or about 55%, is made up of plasma. Slightly less than half of it, or about 41%, is made up of the red blood cells, and a small fraction, about 4%, is made up of white blood cells and platelets. So what functions does the blood perform? We've already seen some of these. The blood helps deliver oxygen, nutrients, and hormones to various tissues. It also removes carbon dioxide and waste products. An additional function of the blood is to provide defense against infections from outside. It also helps in healing of the body tissue, and it helps in repairing once you are wounded. The blood also helps maintain the pH and temperature of different tissues within the body. As we have seen, this helps maintain a normal state of various tissues in the body and prevents any derangements. This function is called homeostasis. So let's look at the blood cells in more detail. There's three types of blood cells we've seen. The white blood cells are also called the leukocytes. The red blood cells are also called the erythrocytes, and the platelets are also called the thrombocytes. The white blood cells form our body's defense against infections. They fight off against bacteria, viruses, and parasites and help keep our body healthy. The red blood cells help carry the oxygen. For this reason, they have a special molecule called the hemoglobin. The hemoglobin binds oxygen and carries it from lungs to the tissues where it delivers them. The platelets are involved in a function called clotting. So essentially, when you get wounded and start bleeding, the platelets get activated at the site of bleeding and form a plug to stop the bleeding, and this stops and prevents too much loss of blood from the body. There's another thing to keep in mind about the blood cells, and that's the blood types. These blood types arise because there are special molecules called antigens present on the surface of blood cells. They can be classified under two different systems. The ABO system notes if there is an A antigen, a B antigen, or no antigen called O on the RBCs. If there is just an A antigen, the blood group is A. If there's just a B antigen, the blood group is B. If there's both an A and B antigens, it's the blood group AB, whereas if there is no antigen, it's the blood group O. Similarly, we have an RH or rhesus system, and if it is present, the blood group is called positive, and if it's absent, the blood group is called negative. Together, they give rise to 8 different blood types: A positive, A negative, B positive, B negative, AB positive, AB negative, O positive, and O negative. AB positive has A, B, and RH antigens. Since it has all 3 antigens, it can receive blood from every other blood type, and it is called the universal recipient. O negative has neither A nor B nor RH antigens. Since it has no antigens, it can give blood to every other blood type, and hence it is called the universal donor. The knowledge of blood groups, therefore, is important when you're transfusing blood to a person who needs it. The right blood type is very important, and a wrong blood type can cause lots of harm in the body.